Hi everyone, Dr. Sam here. I want to take a minute and again thank you for doing this intense work with me. This work is not easy, and it ultimately brings you on a journey to living a more fulfilled life. Today, I want to really talk about relationships and how to make your relationship grow and feel connection and spontaneity and excitement and all the things that we want in our marriages and our relationships, but oftentimes are lacking after being married for X number of years. Why is it that marriages fail, and what kinds of issues come up and come into my office over and over and over again that ultimately leads to their demise and their ultimate failure? There are many issues that come up, but some of the ones that I want to talk about today are critical, and I want you to avoid in your marriage to make sure that you live a more successful and more fulfilled life with your partner. So let's get started. Pull out your pen, pull out your paper, and take down some notes, or at least get some mental notes of what's going on, because I think it's very likely that you will identify some of these in your marriage, or you may be on a path to having some of these problems, and you may identify precursors in your marriage that potentially could lead to these problems. So I encourage you to fix those little, sparks of the flame before the flame bursts and we have a fire in the room, okay? So again, pull out your pen, pull out your paper, get ready, and let's talk about the different things today that ultimately can make your marriage fail. So the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of rehashing the same problems over and over and over again. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes when people are married for 10 years, 15 years, 20-something years, there are certain issues that come up in the marriage repeatedly. And oftentimes it's because there hasn't been intense discussion about those things. Either party has resentment towards the other person, or both parties never agreed to begin with. And what ends up happening is that each individual holds frustration against the person, and the same issues keep on coming up over and over and over again. So let me give you some examples of what that looks like in my office and what people oftentimes come and bring to the room. Let's use a classic example of John and Amanda. Let's say that John and Amanda have been married for 15 years. They have a very strong marriage. They've got 2 wonderful children. John works intense hours. Amanda also works really hard. But the problem is that both of them have found that over the years, their connection is not the same as it was. Amanda's super caught up with the kids. John is constantly at work. And ultimately, one day, Amanda finds out that John's had an affair. It's actually pretty common, okay? Affairs in marriages are more common than you think. So if it's happening in your marriage or has happened in your marriage, the truth of the matter is that you're not alone. What ends up happening oftentimes is in marital counseling, Amanda, whoever the one was who felt violated, and they felt like their partner had stepped out of the marriage, comes to the room and says, this is all his fault, or this is all her fault, pointing to whoever the individual is who had the affair. When in fact, affairs oftentimes are not one individual's fault. Rather, affairs are both people in the marriage or in the relationship's fault. How is it possible that if John chose to have an affair with another person, that it possibly could be Amanda's fault? It's because both people have needs that are being met in a marriage. Both people have a need for emotional connection. Both people have a need for physical intimacy. Both people have a need for validation. There are many needs that we have in our marriage, and what happens is oftentimes one person feels that those needs are not being met by another person, or both people feel that their needs are not being met, and therefore one person chooses to step out. So what happens? Let's say Amanda and John come into my office, it's been 15 years of marriage, and they say, we've got 2 beautiful children together. John's like, I made this mistake. I regret it. I don't want this to happen again. I want to stay married to my wife. But she's looking in the room and she's like, there's no way I'll be able to trust you ever again. I can't believe you did this. I hate you. I resent you. You're horrible. I can't even love you anymore. Let's say it's a very classic example that I see in my office. The question is, are you going to continue that problem and continue that resentment and anger in the marriage for forever? That will just lead to a lot of hatred, animosity, and frustration and fighting for the next God knows how many years? So the answer is no. Rather, the goal is to identify something that is a reasonable solution that both parties feel comfortable with in order for both people to feel validated. So what happens in this case oftentimes is Amanda has a need to feel like she can Amanda feels the need that she can trust John again. And the answer is she may need something tangible in order to gain trust in John again. Let's say she says to him, for the next 2 years, I need to be able to have unlimited access to your phone every single night and look at it. Will that provide her with more security? Let's say she says, I need to be able to look at your phone without asking for forever. Will that provide her with more security? Will it be, you need to block whoever the person he's having an affair with, never communicate with her again, promise me that, and give me unlimited access to your phone for the next 2 years? Whatever it is, there has to be some kind of way to repair the violation of trust. And only the person whose trust feels violated can really come up with that solution and be willing to have that solution. If either partner refuses or is not willing to come up with a solution, then ultimately resentment, anger, hatred, animosity is just to continue to fester in the marriage for the foreseeable future. So what I encourage people to do is to come up with some kind of tangible solution in order to regain trust and let that start working its way back to developing emotional intimacy. I think it's also important that both parties recognize and realize that things don't just happen and it's not just one person's fault. Both people's needs are being not met, or one person's needs are not being met in the marriage, and that we need to communicate what those needs are. Make sense? What's another example of some kinds of problems that come up over and over and over again and get rehashed in marriages that lead to frustration and animosity? Let's say that one partner doesn't allow another partner to have another child, and one partner really wanted another child. And before you know it, it's too late. It leads to frustration and hatred. It's not that one person didn't give the person that opportunity. It's that either one person didn't vocalize themselves enough or they weren't able to meet an agreement. And that may have been a deal breaker back then. And if it was, that should have been spoken about. But if you choose not to voice your opinion, if you choose to be quiet and not really say how you feel, then of course it's going to lead to a little spark that turns into the big fire. If the Amanda example had happened and Amanda and John had been communicating and John had said, I need emotional validation. I need physical intimacy with you. That is missing in our marriage right now. Let's figure out how we can recreate it. Perhaps John wouldn't have stepped out of the marriage. If one partner had said, I really wanted to have another child. It's really important to me. This is something that I've wanted my entire life. And the other person says, no. But the other person says, but this is important to me, sweetheart. And there's an open discussion about it in detail, then perhaps they can come to some kind of resolution. Or they can say it's a deal breaker then. Likewise, another example, forcing someone into having another child when they really don't want one. That can lead to, frustration, animosity, and anger and resentment. But it's important that whatever the issue is, it doesn't get rehashed over and over and over again. What about resentment towards work? What about resentment that your wife is keeping you in some kind of job that you don't like? Or your husband's keeping you in some kind of job that you don't like? No one keeps you in any kind of job. No one forces you to do anything. Unless somebody's literally holding you against the wall, nobody's forcing you to do anything, right? So it's important that we recognize rehashing these frustrations, building this resentment is ineffective and is ultimately going to make a marriage fail. So that's the first thing in terms of ways to make your marriage fail. The next thing I want to talk about is ignoring the need for physical connection. Why is this so important? I think that people need to understand that sex is a primitive need. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by sex being a primitive need? We're all humans. Therefore, we're all animals. We're all mammals. So what do we need? We need food, shelter, clothing. and the ability to reproduce. In other words, we need sex. So the idea of dry spells, when people say, oh, I'm just on a dry spell, it's no big deal, our sex, I just was not in the mood, that's not okay. People have a need for physical connection. It's part of our innate nature, our innate want to reproduce. And we can't ignore that. And we need to force ourselves to make time for physical connection. We need to force ourselves to make time for sex and intimacy. If you're not able to have sex because you've got too much emotional dysregulation over the topic, that's okay. Excuse me. We can have gentle exposures to it. Something as simple as a prolonged hug, a kiss, holding hands. The need for physical touch is there no matter what. And we need to be able to take the time of our day out of our day, even if it's 10 seconds, to touch our partner, to show them that we physically are there for them. Not just mentally, not just emotionally, but we are physically there for them. Let's pretend there's someone really, really sick. You've heard of the example of someone being really, really sick and a nurse coming by their bedside and just holding their hand, or a doctor giving them bad news and just holding their hand. It's because that person has a need for physical connection at that moment. They feel emotionally vulnerable, and they need physical connection in order to ease that emotional vulnerability. Well, who are you going to be more emotionally vulnerable with than with your own spouse, right? It's interesting because we're going to be emotionally vulnerable and then we're going to get rid of the need for physical connection. There's a cognitive dissonance there. It doesn't make any sense. So we have a need for physical connection and we have a need also for spontaneity. So let's say that you do have physical connection in your marriage, but it's getting old. We're having the same sex over and over and over again. You look at your partner and you say, let's try and change it up a bit. And the person may be nervous to say that because they feel emotionally vulnerable. What if they're going to be rejected? Is that a reason? No, because they have a need for spontaneity. They have a need for change. So we express this to our partner, hey, I have that need for physical connection and I'm getting kind of bored with what we've been doing. Is there a way we could change it up a bit? It doesn't need to be anything crazy. Even a slight change, holding hands for a bit longer, kissing for a bit longer, that's what makes the difference. Not anything radical. So now we've gone through 2 ways to make our marriage fail. 1 is rehashing the same problems over and over and over again. And 2 is ignoring the need for physical connection. The next one I want to talk about is wanting to be victorious. What do I mean by that? People who fight to win. Do you ever do that in your marriage? You argue. The person won't let up because they're so goddamn stubborn because they want to win. What about the one who won't apologize over and over and over again just because they want to win? Or did your marriage start off when you were dating that it was kind of a debate as to who would say I love you first? Let's get rid of our pride, guys. Let's not fight to win. Let's discuss and connect, right? If we're fighting to win, we're not really listening. We're just trying to defend a point. Really, we're just debating. And how is that healthy for a marriage, debating? It's not, because we're not listening to the other person's point of view. And if we are listening, we're just trying to turn their words around to make it useful for ourselves and our point of view. Which means we're being kind of jerky, right? Let's use the example of, apologizing over a fight with the in-laws. Let's say my husband were to get into an argument with my parents. And I am insisting, listen, I need you to apologize. I need you to apologize. I need you to apologize. If that were to be the case, right? He could sit there and say, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize. And he could be stubborn about it, right? Because he wants to win the argument. But instead, I could talk to him with feeling, not as a debate, and look at him and say, hey, sweetheart, this is really important to me. It bothered me at my core how you were communicating with my parents. And I would really appreciate it if you would just talk to them about it and apologize for your behavior. And express that with feeling, not with, you need to do this now, I'm angry at you. Don't debate it. Otherwise, it will encourage your spouse to win, to fight back, to not apologize and collide with you. So now we've gone over 3 different things. We've talked about ways to make our marriage fail by rehashing the same problems over and over, ignoring our need for physical connection, and wanting to be victorious. The next thing I want to talk about is how we define our family. Imagine that we have a hula hoop surrounding us, okay? Imagine that we have a pink hula hoop surrounding us, okay? You know how when you swing your hula hoop from side to side, where the hula hoop kind of goes can be from one place to another? The goal of the hula hoop is to stay as much in the middle in this case as possible, okay? Because I want the circle around you to be the exact same throughout, and I don't really want it to move. Why is that? I want your circle and who you define your family inside of it, or whoever you throw inside the hula hoop, to be identical to those who your spouse defines. Why is that? Because of conflict styles. Let's say that my hula hoop is defined by my husband and I. Let's say his hula hoop is defined by him and I. What does that mean? They're absolutely identical, and the 2 conflict styles that are in the 2 hula hoops, meaning the way we each choose to fight, only involves one another. Let's say that hula hoop changes and I choose to include somebody else in my hula hoop, like my mother. A little bit of enmeshment going on, right? I'm bringing my mother into our marriage. All of a sudden, I have more conflict styles, more people who are arguing, more different ways that people argue to change the dynamic of the hula hoop. And all of a sudden, my circle and his circle don't look alike. And now we can't balance our hula hoop, and our hula hoop is certainly going to fall. We want to avoid enmeshment in general in relationships. We want to avoid enmeshment in the sense that we don't want one partner to be too enmeshed with their family. And we want the goal of that circle to be whatever family you choose to create together, meaning you, your spouse, and your children. Both of you should see your circle similarly. And you should see who is on the outer edge of the circles and the hula hoops as similarly as possible as well. Make sense? So now we've gone through 4 of them. We've talked about rehashing the same problems over and over. We've talked about ignoring the need for physical connection. We've talked about wanting to be victorious. We've talked about defining your family and who's in it. In other words, who's in your hula hoop. The next one is a big one, okay? The next one that is going to make your marriage fail is hiding or controlling money. Money. One of the not talked about, that's what I meant to say, issues in a marriage, that is a big issue in a marriage. Why? Because money is a symbol of power. So when someone controls the money, what ends up happening is one person feels empowered and the other person feels inferior. In general, financial decisions, assuming you guys share accounts, should be made together as a team. If you don't share accounts, still, financial decisions should be discussed to a certain extent with one another. Because your job is to build together, right? Your job is to create a foundation together. And if one person's hiding money from the other person, really what they're trying to do is hide their power. Hoard it. Protect themselves in the event that something weren't going to work. And really, if we have a marriage that's full of trust, openness, and honesty, we should be able to talk about money. And 2 people should be able to make decisions together. And it's not just with people who have lots of money. It's also with people who have little bits of money. Let's say you've got little bits of money and you guys have to make a decision as to what we're going to do with it. Are we going to buy this car? Are we not going to buy this car? Are we going to change our job? Are we not going to change our job? Those kinds of decisions, life-changing decisions, ideally should be made together. Sometimes it's useful too to have an understanding of what is expected and what's not expected. So like, let's say you share your finances, okay? And let's say you have a certain number that you guys have agreed upon that if you choose to spend more money than this certain number, you will have a discussion about it. In my marriage, this was something that happened very early on. My husband had chosen to invest some money at the time that was, a certain amount of money. And to me, at the time, it seemed like a decent amount of money. And he chose to do it, and he didn't talk to me about it. I felt betrayed. I felt frustrated. I felt insecure and inferior because I felt like my decision in that process wasn't important. From that point forward, we had a clear understanding. If there was a certain amount of money or if financial decisions like that were being made, we would discuss it together. We want there to be open communication and we want there to be trust. And when we deal with something like that is similar to a power struggle, we want those discussions to be had together. So we've talked about a few things. We've talked about ways to make our marriages fail by rehashing the same problems, ignoring the need for physical connection, wanting to be victorious, defining your family and who's in it or who's in your hula hoop, and hiding or controlling money. The next one I want to talk about is expecting a resolution at inopportune times. What do I mean by that? Ever find that your husband or your wife fights with you at the worst moment? Yeah. So my husband knows that if you catch me after 9 o'clock at night, do not talk to me about anything important. Otherwise, I will be irritable, cranky, and frustrated. It's not fair to engage somebody at times where you know that they're going to be exhausted, cranky, and just annoyed, right? Big discussions should happen at more opportune times, okay? Is your husband a morning person? Is he an evening person? What is he? Try and think about it for a minute and try and have big discussions at the times where he's going to be the most cognitively willing to accept whatever discussion you're having, and vice versa. Don't expect a resolution at inopportune times, right? We wouldn't expect that our car would stay clean if it's raining outside, right? We wouldn't go for a car wash when it's raining because that wouldn't make sense, right? We want to get our car clean and it's raining and there's gonna be mud on the ground, so we don't go to the car wash when it's raining outside, right? Well, the same thing. We don't have a discussion about something important when our spouse is half asleep. It sounds so obvious, but for some reason, it's so not. So many couples choose to have difficult conversations at the worst time. It's okay to table your conversations. It's okay to say now is not the time, and we can discuss this at this time. It's not fair to just ignore it, but it is okay to suggest an alternative time. So we've gone through a bunch. Rehashing the same problems over and over, ignoring your need for physical connection, wanting to be victorious, defining your family and who's in it, hiding or controlling money, expecting a resolution at inopportune times. And the next one I want to talk about is allowing someone who is a potential partner too close to you. Assuming you and your spouse have a relationship that is monogamous. Assuming that you and your spouse, monogamous meaning it could be emotionally monogamous, it could be meaning physically monogamous, whatever it is, meaning you two are your one and only when it comes to either emotional things or physical things. It doesn't matter, okay? So let's say you choose to have an open relationship from sexually, but you understand that your partner and you have your one another's like number one when it comes to emotional connections, okay? However you define that, anybody who potentially could interfere with however you guys have defined your marriage, okay, is looked at as a threat, okay? This could be somebody from work. This could be someone from the kids' school. This is whoever it is who one partner feels uncomfortable with. We want to be respectful of those boundaries. We want to make sure that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to get too close to those people, right? So let's say I know that at work, there's somebody who I work very closely with, who is emotionally available at the time, who is hitting on me, who is smart and has expressed a real interest. That person is providing me with a sense of validation that I may or may not be getting at the same degree at home. Therefore, it's important to communicate that to my spouse, right? And express that this person is potentially a threat to our connection to one another. And if that's the case, we want that person way away from our hula hoop, okay? So we don't want somebody who is a potential partner too close to us. This is especially true if there is a history of infidelity. Why is this? Because if somebody's, been having affairs in the past, it's sometimes it's easier for some people to have another affair in the future. Let's go over them again. Ways to make our marriage fail: rehashing the same problems over and over again, ignoring the need for physical connection, wanting to be victorious, defining your family and who's in it, hiding or controlling money, expecting resolution at inopportune times, and allowing someone who is a potential partner too close to you. The next one is a way to make our marriage work. And I want to end with this because it's a positive note. To not forget to appreciate one another. To not forget to show affection. A simple kiss, a simple hug, holding each other for literally 10 seconds in the morning. That's it. 10 full seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Isn't it crazy how 10 seconds feels so long when there's purpose associated with it? If you can just hold your spouse for 10 seconds in the morning, it shows physical connection, it shows appreciation, and it's positive reinforcement to make your marriage work and last longer. What about saying thank you for little things? Let's say that my husband, he just went out tonight to get some kind of coffee for me, and it's late at night, he went out to do it, and if I look at him and I say thank you, it doesn't have much meaning. But if I look at him and say, listen, I really want to thank you for taking the time late at night to go out and figure out this coffee machine and all of that for me so I can have coffee first thing tomorrow morning. And if I say it with meaning and I say thank you, I show appreciation and gratitude, and it gets me closer to him. Picking out the details of what they actually did and defining them helps make the thank you even stronger. So instead of just saying thank you, say, listen, I just want to tell you I really appreciate that you went out at 9 something at night, got me the coffee machine, got me my favorite kind of coffee with the K-cups to put in there, and it just means so much to me that you did that. So I went through the specific details of what he actually did instead of just saying thank you. If you want to say thank you effectively too, good eye contact is important, as well as tilting your head slightly. When you tilt your head slightly, it gives a little bit more meaning to the words you're saying, and great eye contact is always super, super, super important. So I want to wrap up and go over all those things one more time about ways to make our marriage fail, and the last one is important things to make it succeed. First one was rehashing the same problems over and over again, like affairs, not having another child, those kinds of things. The next one was ignoring the need for physical connection. That means understanding that sex is primitive and we need to have it. The third one was wanting to be victorious, in other words, fighting to win. The next one was defining your family or your hula hoop and who was in the hula hoop and making it identical to whoever your spouse defines their family as. The next one was hiding or controlling money, because money is a sign of power, and power should be shared in a relationship. The next one was expecting a resolution at inopportune times. And I gave you the example of the car wash and going in the rain to the car wash. It doesn't make any sense, so why would we do that? The next one was allowing someone who is a potential partner too close to you. You've got to view them as a threat and understand what need they are providing that you are not having in your marriage. And the last one is forgetting to appreciate one another and the need to continue to appreciate one another throughout the course of your relationship. I really hope this was helpful. I strongly encourage you to take some of these skills and discuss them in your marriage and have an open conversation about them. The first step is identifying them and then acting on some of the solutions that we discussed. I really thank you guys for taking this journey with me, and I look forward to our continued work together. Have a good one. Bye-bye.